If you spot a woman at a weekend market in Zambales wearing a faded shirt and rubber slippers, her hair loosely tied back, hands caked with actual soil from an afternoon of farm work, you wouldn't think much of it. You'd probably assume she's just a local farmer taking a break from her daily chores. But that woman is actually Bea Alonzo, one of the highest-grossing actresses in Philippine film history, with movies that have collectively pulled in over P3.115 billion at the box office, a net worth estimated at around $8 million, and a 16-hectare farm she quietly built over a decade. So why does a woman this wealthy choose to live like she has nothing to prove? Let's find out. Chapter 1. The Architecture of a Lonely Childhood. Before Bea Alonzo became the household name that millions of Filipinos fell in love with on their television screens, she was just a little girl in Cainta, Rizal, trying to make sense of a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. We often look at superstars and assume they were born into the glow of the spotlight, but Bea's origin story is rooted in a much quieter, much more difficult reality. She was born Filbert Angeli Ranolo Fagastrom on October 17, 1987. Her father, Philip Fagastrom, was British, and her mother, Marianne Ranolo, is Filipino. From the outside, that mix of heritage sounds exotic, almost charmed. A British Filipino girl growing up in the Philippines. It's the kind of background that sounds like it belongs in the opening credits of one of her romantic films. But the reality was far from a movie script. When Bea was only 4 years old, her parents separated. And just like that, the stable ground she was standing on simply disappeared. As the eldest child, she was the one who absorbed the impact of that separation the most. Instead of one stable home with a white picket fence, she ended up being raised by a trinity of women: her mother, her grandmother, and her aunt. Life became a series of transitions. She was constantly moving between households, between different neighborhoods, and between different versions of herself that she didn't quite recognize yet. All that moving around left a mark that went far beyond the simple inconvenience of changing schools or packing boxes. What's more is that she grew depressed during her youth. In various interviews, she has admitted that she was incredibly lonely, feeling cut off from the rest of the world during her early teenage years. Think about that for a second. This woman who eventually filled cinemas across the entire country once sat alone as a teenager, isolated, wondering where she actually belonged and whether anyone was truly paying attention to her existence. It wasn't the kind of light loneliness you feel on a slow Sunday afternoon. But here's the thing about that kind of loneliness. Sometimes it teaches you to find peace inside yourself before you ever find it anywhere else. Bea didn't have a stable neighborhood to anchor her identity to. She didn't have a father at home to validate her choices or provide a traditional safety net. She didn't have the luxury of a predictable, boring childhood that most people take for granted. So, out of necessity, she built her sense of self from the inside out. She did it quietly. She did it without anyone cheering her on. She did it without a blueprint. That internal foundation is exactly what has protected her for decades, from all the glittering traps that swallow most celebrities whole. It protected her from the desperate need for external validation, the compulsive spending to fill an emotional void, and the performance of success that often leaves people emptier than they started. Chapter 2. The Fire Inside the Craft. At 13, she was spotted at the Mutia ng Pasig beauty pageant by talent manager Archie Ilagan, who recognized something in this quiet, mixed-heritage girl that went far beyond her looks. He saw a burning desire to accomplish something real. He arranged for her to audition at ABS-CBN's Talent Center, now known as Star Magic, where she was accepted into Star Circle Batch 10 in 2001, and she made her acting debut in the youth-oriented series K2BU in 2002. She was barely 15. She hadn't finished school. She had no portfolio, no famous relatives clearing a path for her, no safety net. She just had that internal fire she had been quietly building alone during all those years of moving and loneliness. And from the very beginning, she chose to direct that fire toward the craft itself, not the spotlight that came with it. When Bea Alonzo finally exploded into mainstream fame, she didn't do it by being the loudest person in the room. She didn't do it by creating scandals or chasing headlines. She did it by being the most believable person on the screen. Her early role as Katrina Argos in the primetime series K Tagal Kang Hinintay paired her with John Lloyd Cruz. The chemistry they built on screen wasn't the kind that gets manufactured in a casting room or through clever marketing. It was forged through real emotional honesty. Audience felt it immediately. The connection was raw, specific, and hauntingly true. The show became one of the first Filipino soap operas to receive a nomination at the International Emmy Awards. Bea was still a teenager, and already, without even planning for it, she had made history. What followed over the next 2 decades was one of the most extraordinary box office runs in the history of Philippine cinema. Chapter 3. The Billion Peso Empire. Film after film, Bea delivered performances that stayed with people long after the credits rolled and the lights came back on in the cinema. Think about the impact of One More Chance in 2007. It grossed over $150 million and turned her into the box office queen at the 38th Box Office Entertainment Awards. But more than the money, it gave the Philippines characters like Basha, whose heartbreaks felt like our own. Then The Mistress dropped in 2012. Then A Second Chance in 2015, which became a phenomenon of its own, shattering records. Then The Love Affair that same year. Her films have grossed over $3.15 billion at the box office. Let that number sink in. That makes her one of the highest-grossing Filipino box office stars of all time. That kind of track record doesn't just build a career, it builds an empire. It gives you a level of leverage that very few people in the world ever achieve. A-list stars in the Philippines are known to earn significant sums, often between P3 million to P5 million per movie project. When you stack that across over 2 decades of non-stop work, films, primetime dramas, hosting, a debut album that went triple platinum, and endorsement deals with brands both global and local, and you start to understand how the numbers accumulate into something enormous. Her wealth can be attributed to her successful acting career, lucrative endorsement deals, and savvy investments in real estate and businesses. On top of that, when she made the shocking career move of signing with GMA Network after nearly 19 years with ABS-CBN, the entire industry went into overdrive. Speculation about the value of that contract was everywhere. Reports placed the numbers anywhere between P200 million and P500 million in total deal value, with some sources estimating her taping rate alone at P250,000 per day. While the figures were never officially confirmed, the speculation itself told a story. This was a woman whose name on a contract moved mountains inside the Philippine entertainment industry. She had reached a level of financial security that most people can only dream of. And yet, with all of that money flowing in from every direction, Bea Alonzo never once let it visibly change the way she carried herself. You won't see a designer handbag collection flaunted across her social media every week. There are no loud announcements about her latest luxury car purchases. You won't find her doing penthouse photo shoots carefully staged to remind the world that she has made it. There are no curated displays of expensive living that most people in her tax bracket feel almost obligated to perform as part of their brand. She just kept working. She kept showing up. She kept being, in every observable way, the same girl from Cainta who learned early on that material things don't hold the shape of your identity together when times get hard. That contrast between the astronomical size of her wealth and the quiet simplicity of how she actually lives is what makes people stop and genuinely ask, why? Chapter 4. Beati Firma. The Blessed Ground. If you want to find where Bea Alonzo truly lives when the cameras aren't rolling, you won't find her at a 5-star resort or a gated compound in a wealthy Forbes Park-style subdivision surrounded by round-the-clock security. Instead, you'll find her at Beati Firma. She owns Beati Firma, which translates to Blessed Farm, located in Iba, Zambales. It is a 16-hectare organic farm, estimated to be worth between P60 million to P240 million, which Bea and her mother have developed together over the years. She bought the land back in 2011 when almost no one in showbiz would have thought to look that far west of Manila for a long-term investment. At the time, the property was raw, damaged. It had come through a wildfire, and there was just one tree that had managed to survive all of that destruction. Bea looked at that tree and said it reminded her of herself. Surviving everything. Still standing. Still going. So, instead of sinking her early earnings into a penthouse she'd rarely visit or a collection of luxury cars she'd drive twice a year just to feel something, she chose to pour her money into the earth. Literally. She developed the land slowly, with patience and genuine intention over an entire decade. She didn't rush the process. She installed solar panels for sustainable electricity. She built a working alfresco kitchen designed for actual use, not just for show. She constructed a Texan-inspired cabin with a full panoramic view of the Zambales mountain range. She planted gardens, cultivated fruit trees, and brought in animals. It became a functioning farm that feeds real people. Her approach to the interiors of her home reflects her personal philosophy. It has to be functional, not just aesthetic. She almost always prefers Filipino designers, filling her space with hardwood furnishings, vintage textiles, and artisanal accents. It's beautiful without being performative. It is a home designed to be lived in, not a set designed to be photographed and forgotten. But what's most striking is what she does when she's there. Bea Alonzo wasn't watching the farm work from a shaded veranda while sipping something expensive. She's out there in the dirt. After typhoons, she was seen collecting fallen branches, stacking them up to protect the property from future wildfires, or repurposing them as fence materials and firewood for cooking. She posted about it online without a trace of self-consciousness or irony. She wrote about it the way a person writes about a task they genuinely love, like a normal chore that needs doing and that provides a deep sense of satisfaction. Because to Bea Alonzo, that is exactly what it is. It's just what you do when you actually care about something. This is the version of wealth that most celebrity profiles never bother to explain. It's not the kind you display on red carpets to make others jealous. It's the kind you grow. It's the kind that puts food on the table, that has roots deep enough in the soil to survive a storm, and that can endure a wildfire because you were the one who built it back up yourself from a single standing tree. Chapter 5. The Sophisticated Investor Next Door. Beyond the farm, the fuller picture of how Bea Alonzo manages her money is one of the most quietly sophisticated financial stories in Philippine entertainment. While she lives simply, she is not financially stagnant. She is incredibly smart with her assets. She owns several high-value properties, including a multi-million peso home in Quezon City with a massive 900 square meters of floor area. She also owns 2 condominium units from Stant Lucia Land Inc., one in Pasig and another along the Tagaytay-Nasugbu Highway. But perhaps her most telling investment came in 2022, when she purchased an apartment in Madrid, Spain. That investment wasn't just about owning European real estate. It helped her secure permanent resident status in Spain, a benefit she was able to extend to her mother. That detail is worth pausing on. She didn't buy the Madrid apartment to casually drop a European address into her Instagram bio or to show off to her peers. She bought it so that her mother, the same woman who raised her across multiple households with very little stability, could have legal standing and a home in another country. That's not a flex. That's a daughter who remembers where she came from and uses every tool available to protect the people who showed up for her. Her financial literacy doesn't stop at real estate. As of June 2021, she remained among ABS-CBN Corporation's top 100 stockholders, holding 58,000 shares of the company. She understands how money actually works. She has studied it, moved it deliberately, and made it grow quietly in the background while the public was busy watching her cry on screen in primetime dramas. But here is what she never did. She never let the accumulation of assets become her public personality. She never started performing wealth the way so many celebrities feel pressured to do. She didn't pivot into the luxury travel brand ambassador lifestyle where every post is a framed 5-figure purchase. When she launched her YouTube channel, #ByBea, she explained that she did it because she wanted fans to actually know her real self. She was genuinely scared that people only loved the characters she played, Basha, Bobby, and the others, but didn't know or care about the actual woman behind them. That fear of being loved for the wrong reasons is the fear of someone who never confused fame with self-worth. It's the same quiet inner clarity that keeps her from needing the outside world to confirm her value through what she owns. She knows her value isn't tied to the price tag on her clothes, but to the roots she has planted in the ground. Chapter 6. Walking Through the Public Fire. Choosing simplicity in lifestyle doesn't mean life chose to be simple in return. In the world of Philippine entertainment, public scrutiny is relentless. Bea Alonzo has had to walk through fires that had absolutely nothing to do with her farm in Zambales. There have been very public heartbreaks, relationships that began and ended in full view of an entire nation that felt entitled to an opinion on every detail. Her dynamic with John Lloyd Cruz, though largely on screen, was so iconic that its real-life dimensions became constant tabloid fodder. Her relationship with Gerald Anderson played out in ways that were incredibly painful in public. Most recently, her engagement to Dominic Roque, which seemed like a hopeful landing after years of romantic turbulence, fell apart in early 2024. It immediately became the country's #1 headline for weeks. Everyone had a theory, everyone had a comment, and everyone was watching to see how she would react. Through every one of those moments, Bea Alonzo did not dissolve. She did not post long, bitter statements designed to win public sympathy at someone else's expense. She did not weaponize her massive social media platform for public revenge, a tactic so many celebrities use when they feel wronged and need witnesses to their pain. She described 2024 as the hardest year of her life. But her takeaway wasn't bitterness. She said she learned to trust God's plan when her own carefully constructed plans fell apart. She learned to stay open to surprises instead of gripping too tightly to a sense of control. That's not the response of a star following a publicist's script. That is the response of a woman who was shaped by deep instability from the age of 4. She has been practicing the skill of standing calmly in the middle of uncertainty for much longer than most people realize. She doesn't need to shout to be heard. Her silence and her resilience speak much louder. In 2022, she even filed cybercrime complaints against entertainment columnists for allegedly spreading false reports about tax evasion. She didn't do this because she enjoyed conflict or needed a public battle to feel powerful. She did it because she understood that silence in the face of deliberate lies isn't humility, it's surrender. She drew her line clearly, used the proper legal channels, and then kept moving forward without letting the noise consume her. She doesn't stay stuck in what hurts her. She absorbs the lesson, processes the pain, and then she goes back to work. Chapter 7. The Evolution of a Legend. The work itself has never stopped evolving, which is one of the most underappreciated things about her career. Many stars in her position would have coasted for the last decade on the goodwill of their past hits. She could have stayed the rom-com queen forever, taking safe, bankable roles that required very little of her. She would have been perfectly comfortable and financially set for life. But that was never enough for her. In 2024, she took on a role in Widow's War alongside Carla Abellana. It was a dark, power-driven murder drama, a significant departure from the roles that made her famous. It became a major hit, proving that she could remain a primetime TV staple well into the second decade of her career. She chose that role specifically because it was different. It was darker, more complex, and more morally ambiguous. She is now in talks for an action drama for HBO, directed by the award-winning Eric Mahdi, and she has projects lined up with Palanca award-winning filmmaker June Lana. She is actively seeking offbeat projects that appeal to a global market. After more than 20 years in the industry, she is still running toward harder, more interesting challenges. She isn't looking for a safer paycheck. She's looking for work that genuinely challenges her soul. And when the director calls cut, she goes back to being the woman who finds joy in the ordinary. She goes home to Beati Firma and gets soil under her fingernails. She experiments with recipes in her kitchen, which she describes as one of her genuine pleasures. She adds another refrigerator magnet to her collection from her latest travels, a hobby so personal and unflashy that it seems designed to confuse people who expect diva behavior. She once said that if she weren't an actress, she would have been an interior designer or an events coordinator. Why? Because making spaces feel like home is something she genuinely loves. It's not for the camera. It's for her. Everything Bea Alonzo loves, she loves for real. She doesn't do things because they photograph well or because they signal a particular lifestyle tier to her followers. She does them because they are actually, genuinely hers. Chapter 8. The True Definition of Luxury. We live in an era where a person's worth is constantly being measured by their follower count, the brands they align with, the price of the watch on their wrist, or the neighborhood they live in. In the glittering, drama-drenched ecosystem of Philippine celebrity culture, where life milestones are announced in press conferences and breakups trend on Twitter before the couple has even had a chance to breathe, Bea Alonzo stands like a stubborn outsider. She doesn't spend money to prove anything to anyone. She doesn't perform her wealth to remind people she earned it. She doesn't need a designer wardrobe to walk into a room and make people feel her presence. Her 20-plus years of work already say everything that needs to be said. She has 5 championship rings worth of box office hits and critical acclaim. For Bea, success was never about the showing. It was about the surviving, and then the building, and then the quiet, purposeful living that comes after you finally stopped needing the external world to confirm that you exist and that you matter. She has said, "It's very important to always believe in yourself and have faith in yourself because that's the only way you can go places." And that belief wasn't a gift. It wasn't something she stumbled into by luck. It was the one thing she built entirely on her own, in the silence of those lonely teenage years in Rizal, moving from home to home, figuring out who she was without a stable mirror to look into. That foundation, built before the fame, before the billions, before the box office records, is why the money never moved her. You cannot be swallowed by a lifestyle if you built your identity long before you ever touched the money. You own the money doesn't own you. In the end, Bea Alonzo isn't wealthy despite living simply. She is wealthy because she never once let the money decide who she was going to be. Her fortune sits in land, in stock, in properties across 2 continents, and in a career built on performances that have genuinely changed how Filipinos see themselves in love and tragedy. But her real wealth, the kind no box office number could ever fully capture, is found in the clarity she brings to every decision she makes. A little girl who was lonely and disconnected at 14 chose, when the fame finally came, not to fill the emptiness with things. She filled it with roots, a farm, her mother, her craft, and that one tree left standing after the fire. The highest form of luxury, it turns out, is knowing exactly who you are when none of the external things are there to define you. Bea Alonzo has known that since she was 4 years old, watching everything shift beneath her feet and learning to find solid ground inside herself anyway. She just also happened to build an empire along the way. And she did it quietly, without ever once needing anyone to watch. Bea Alonzo's journey from a lonely teenager to a self-made billionaire farmer proves that the greatest success is staying true to yourself. So what do you think? Is true wealth about what you can show the world, or about the freedom to finally stop showing off? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to her status, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Until next time.